don't want to keep you for too long here, so I do want to get into our final subject here, talking about Palantir. This is something that I saw you talk about more than once on your channel, and I just truthfully don't think that enough people really know what's going on with it. I will admit that I don't know that I know all the different details about what these new databases are going to do for the American people. Could you just tell everyone a little bit what exactly is it, and what exactly we should be expecting as these things are to actually become implemented here?
Right. For Palantir, I don't know all the technological intricacies of what they actually do to implement these technologies. From my understanding, Palantir, what they do is they go in and create these dashboards,
Hmm.
collating all kinds of different data from different departments in the government to make
Right.
sense of the data. Now, once you have that data, what they say is they're going to put it to good use to, stop terrorists or,
Don't we already have a whole
improve.
department for that?
Yeah, well, so this is part of, I mean, my problem is now you're outsourcing to private interests and you don't, these people don't actually care about the well-being of the country as long as they make money. That's my problem, or one of my problems with this kind of public-private partnership is that the private side, they don't actually care if your country erodes
Hmm.
and conditions worsen. They just care whether they're getting their nut or not. And
Yeah.
as long as they're getting the big contracts, they don't really care. But I think the big issue, I think this is a uniting thing, which is why, I mean, I try to talk about uniting issues, is that nobody on the right or the left like Palantir,
No.
because what they're doing is they're essentially creating something that can be weaponized, right? There's a famous saying, the government, and I'm going to butcher it slightly, but essentially the government is going to try to take as much power as possible. And when they have that power, they're going to abuse that power to the maximum extent possible.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I'm speaking out against is that, hey, this is a situation where it's very similar to like a Patriot Act thing. They're creating different ways to spy on people, and they're saying they're going to do it for good reason, right? They want all your data because and they want to create this master, quote unquote, master database. They've come out and said, no, that's not what we're doing. It's more nuanced than that, whatever. But let's just say, for the sake of what we're our discuss of our discussion, it is something like that, where
Right.
they know everything about everybody all the
Right.
time.
So they're creating these individual databases for basically every person in the country.
Right.
All of your information, internet traffic, like medical history,
Medical, yeah.
basically everything there
Movement,
is to
yeah.
know about you. I mean, like, yeah, all of your movement, GPS. Everyone has a phone on them at all times.
Right.
That's constantly being tracked. Um, every piece of information out there that can be accessed digitally, put it into individual databases for all 340 or 50 million people that are in the country.
Right.
Is that basically what we're talking about here?
That's what, from my understanding, that's what they're doing. Which
Yeah.
they say it's good. They say this is going to be good for the country. That's what, and and the thing is, that's where I'm coming from like a more libertarian perspective, is that you don't want to give these people these powers because they will abuse it. They've shown
Yeah.
that they've abused in the past. They will abuse it again. Uh,
Right.
and so that, and if you let, and then there's other people who know more about the founders, like if you're talking about Peter Thiel involved, okay, so he's done a lot of weird stuff in the background, and he's like this transhumanist guy. He's like, do you really want this dude to be the one with his thumb on the scale, with his finger in the cookie jar of all these things? I don't know about that. And so that's why I've spoken out against this. And also then it relates to all of these mass protests, because I think that was some of the context around these videos, to say, hey, I think they may be kind of trying to create these scenarios where it creates a need for mass surveillance. Because what you're trying to do is generate public acceptance of these types of technology, to say, yes, we do need this, because look at these people on the street. Don't you want to get, don't you want us to be able to stop that guy before he looted that store or before he killed some people in the street? This
So
is what it's
Minority
going to.
Report.
Minority Report is, a lot of people have
Great.
made that analogy on Twitter. I've seen a lot of memes
Yeah.
and clips like that. And that's where my this is a little bit more on the conspiratorial side, is that, hey, is there some of the are some of these events being generated on both sides? Because I think Palantir is a much more of it's a bipartisan thing. Um, that
Yeah.
what's happening here, because I think they received some major contracts under the uh,
Yeah. No, the surveillance
Biden
state is
administration.
always a
Yeah,
bipartisan thing.
it's bipartisan. And so are both sides trying to gin up some kind of controversy and rioting and protest to then create the need for this, and also to distract from some of the other things that might unify us. Let's say war, right? I've heard people talk about that as well, to say, hey, it's kind of interesting how we're having all of these domestic cultural battles here at home right now that seems to be fueled by politicians and the media, and all this is going on at the same time that we might be going to war with Iran and potentially starting World War III over there, and not creating. I mean, imagine if the left and the right could unite on an anti-war protest. I mean, imagine how powerful that could be, and potentially will be if that were to transpire, versus
Yeah.
having this kind of, okay, anti-ICE or no kings protests, um, that seem much more partisan in nature than something like anti-war. Um, so that's kind of where I think people need to understand, not necessarily because not a lot of people know the technology side of Palantir, including myself, or where, or why it's there. But I think what people need to understand is potentially some of the distractions that could lead us down this path to then all of a sudden, oh, we don't have any more rights.
You know what? I think a couple different points I want to make here. I think first and foremost, been against the surveillance state for a long time. Even in my like political infancy, when I was my first election I ever voted in was in the 2008 election. Kind of give you a little bit of dating about how old I am. I voted for Barack Obama as a young 18-year-old who I was really swayed by the idea of getting rid of the Patriot Act, of getting rid of Guantanamo Bay, of getting out of the war in Iraq. So I have thought for a long time that mass surveillance was a bad thing, even before I knew anything about anything as far as
Oh
politics was
yeah,
concerned.
you're ahead of the
And
wave, I
so,
think.
and so every kind of dissent that we've had since then, just more data collection, the prolonging of the Patriot Act, the introduction of the NDAA, what we are seeing now with Palantir, I do not like any of it. In fact, I saw a Republican congresswoman just a couple months ago. She proposed legislation to actually abolish the Patriot Act. Thought that was a great thing. Unfortunately, it went nowhere, but that's not surprising. I do believe in my heart that like we absolutely will be safer with less surveillance. Because unfortunately, the people who are collecting all this surveillance, they never really have our best interests at heart. That is just my personal belief here. They say that they kind of like implemented this to monitor terrorism, so on and so forth. Just as a quick question for everyone who's watching: when's the last time that you actually saw the Department of Homeland Security, or any of these departments rather, flag terrorism in the country? And also,
Well, they say they
outside
have.
of outside
They
of domestic terrorism.
Well, they say they have, but then you find out some of those things may have been like, oh, they were also radicalizing them at the same time, and then diffusing the situation, quote unquote,
Right.
diffusing them.
Right. So I mean, like, and also this mass surveillance state, when it was signed into law back in the early 2000s, it was supposed to be temporary. It was never supposed to
Yeah.
last decades and decades and decades. And now we are seeing a further expansion of that with Palantir, getting more of your data, concentrating it even more. I mean, who's going to have that information? I mean, if you are in the Republican base, and maybe you're thinking to yourself, like, oh, Donald Trump can have that. He'll do benevolent things with that. Do you feel that same way if Joe Biden had that information? If
Right.
Joe Biden did have that information and you feel completely okay with that because you think, oh, Joe Biden's a benevolent figure, he's just going to do good things with that, do you feel okay with Donald Trump having that information? Maybe if the answer to that question is no on both sides, maybe no one should have that information. That, or at least not without a warrant, or at least not without some legal reasoning for obtaining that information. It feels really sketchy to me.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I will say though about like like the protests again popping up. I mean, I don't know that these people really need an excuse to erode our rights. They just manufacture things whenever they want to. If they want to start stripping whites away from people, they just do it. Like they just do it. They don't really need a reason. They don't need like, oh, these protests are happening in the street. That's the reason why we're going to implement Palantir right now. Like we have
Well,
to make sure.
I do think you
I
need
think
a reason. You
they'll
can't have a nice domestic situation and say, well, we need more surveillance. There needs to be some
we have no
issue.
threats to America right now, yet they're trying to send our troops to a war in
Well, they're saying
Iran.
we do have it. They're trying to manufacture the threat, though. Is the point,
Right,
right?
but
As they're saying, hey, nuclear weapons, they could attack New York in a matter of a few months.
which
supposedly.
Netanyahu's been saying for
Right.
30 years.
You're
So
right.
I mean,
But they're trying. There needs to be
yeah,
something. Is my point. And
yeah,
I do 100% agree with you, Des, in terms of like it's hard not to see how this is not going to be used to like deport people who are critical of Israel, or if you take the case of Biden back in the days to like round up people who didn't want to take the vaccine. Similar kinds of things, very different issues, but they're weaponized in different ways depending on the ideology of the party that's in charge.
yeah. I just think that, when it comes to this subject, when it comes to mass surveillance, we've all gotten so comfortable with the idea of being tracked, of the government having this information. This would have been the most scandalous thing ever 25 years ago. If we were going back to the year 2000, pre 9/11.
Mm.
And now, like a quarter century later, we're all so desensitized to it that it feels almost like it's like not even like a blip on the radar. Like, oh, the government has all my information. Okay, whatever. It bothers me so much that is almost like the collective reaction that people have anymore. And I do think that nothing positive is going to come from that. So I really appreciate having the chance to talk about this with you. I think there's a lot more to say about it, but I think we're kind of running a little bit long on time here. So I do appreciate you staying as long as you have today. And I would love to have you back on the show. I know that you and I don't see exactly from the same perspective on all these different issues, but I really did appreciate the conversation. I appreciated hearing somebody else's perspective from all these different things. And James, where can people find you at online if they want to like check in more with you and with 5149?
Yeah, thank you, Des. Before I give all my handles and stuff like that, I just want to thank you for having me on. And I did enjoy our
Yeah,
conversation. I think definitely open to having more conversations because I will say, yes, we do have some differences, maybe in terms of ideology or maybe based on our background or upbringing and things like that. But I
yeah,
think one thing we do share is that we want things to get better
yeah,
for Americans in general,
yeah,
working class Americans, people who are just normal people, not the elite. So I think that we have a lot in common, and then we might
yeah,
disagree on some of the paths to get there, and we might react viscerally different to some of the current events. So I think that does make for interesting conversation and debate to say, hey, what is the best path to get to where we both want to go?
right.
And if people would like to dig into my perspectives a little bit more, you can find me on basically all the platforms. I'm on TikTok, I'm on X, Instagram, as well as YouTube. The handle is all the same at 5149 5149 James Lee spelled with an I. Depending on what kinds of videos you like, short form, TikTok, Instagram. But if you like a little bit more longer videos, a little bit dissect, going a little deeper, go to YouTube. And then X is, sometimes I'll just react and get into some Twitter fights with other people.
Always a good time.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I really appreciate it. For those who are watching the playback, you can go ahead and click into the description of the episode right now, and those links will be there. The TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, X, those links will be underneath. I really do appreciate you coming on. And for everyone, we'll be back with another live next week. I'll be on with Natalie Bensavanga next Friday. We'll be seeing, I'll be also having some other guests on us next week as well, so make sure that you stay tuned for that. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything. And really appreciate everyone for watching this video today. We will see you in the next one.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.